Annunciation Radio presents Say Yes to Life with Peter Range, Senior Fellow for Strategic Initiatives at the Center for Christian Virtue.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Say Yes to Life, where we learn to embrace our Catholic faith in the secular world. I'm your host, Peter Range, Senior Fellow for the Center for Christian Virtue, and welcome to show number 457 as we continue the fight for every single human life, born, preborn, and yours in our world today. And I'm coming to you live from Steak and Shake in Columbus, Ohio, where we're very excited to pull over and do the show because I'm on the road a little bit today. But on today's show, I'm tremendously excited to welcome another doctor. This time it's Dr. John Wood. He's the author of 10 books, including Ordinary Lives, Extraordinary Mission, 5 Steps to Winning the War Within, which is over 250,000 copies distributed to date. He has spoken at hundreds of parishes and schools across the country to help people of all ages, inspiring thousands to embrace the message of the universal call to holiness and to help reawaken the sleeping giant called the Catholic Church. John is the president of a nonprofit organization, Extraordinary Mission, and is an eye doctor who provides mobile eye care to over 40 nursing homes and developmental disability facilities through his business, Mobile Eyes, which he started in 2007. John and his wife, Kristen, have 5 children and were finalists in the 2021 OSV Innovation Challenge for their second grade sacramental family retreat called Dragon Slayers. And in 2024, they released their popular storybook series for kids, The 7 Deadly Dragons, which has inspired families all over the country to slay the dragons of sin with the weapons of virtue. Dr. Wood and I are going to be talking about his life, the 7 Deadly Dragons series, and much more in a minute. But first, let's go ahead and take 180 seconds around Ohio and the nation to talk about what's happening in the pro-life movement and the news. First, folks, from Washington, D.C., we need to call our Ohio state senators. Okay, that's Bernie Moreno and John Husted. They need to hear from us because there is debate and discussion about extending the Obamacare subsidies in a new deal to, introduce and have people have healthcare help. Now, whether or not you think those Obamacare subsidies should be extended or not extended, if they are, this is what we fundamentally believe as pro-lifers, that they should include the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment keeps our taxpayer dollars from funding abortion. And there is no world where a pro-life senator or pro-life congressman should be voting for the extension of these Obamacare subsidies without the Hyde Amendment. That ensures our taxpayer dollars do not fund abortions. So call Senator Bernie Moreno at 202-224-2315 and Senator John Husted at 202-224-3353. The current protections as in place are simply not enough. All right, secondly, abortion drugs are flooding the United States of America. A new Charlotte Lozier Institute report documents how international entities are bypassing U.S. laws and regulations to ship massive numbers of abortion drugs nationwide. The report discusses international abortion centers that mail drugs into the U.S., international online pharmacies that sell abortion drugs to U.S. customers, and community abortion drug networks that source abortion drugs internationally and distribute them around the country. Drug-induced abortions, accounting for 2/3 of the abortions in the United States, have surged in recent years. Although only the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved abortion drugs distributed by the 3 U.S. sponsors may legally be sold in the U.S., the FDA's 2021 removal of the in-person dispensing requirement coincided with a surge in the availability of abortion drugs from international sources. So right now, the Trump administration, they're bombing boats that are bringing fentanyl and other drugs into the country. Again, we could debate the morality of doing such actions, but the reality is, under our noses, there is millions of abortion drugs flooding the United States of America. It's time for the administration to take action on it. All right, third, it is time to march. The March for Life in Washington, D.C. is right around the corner, and I hope to see you in our nation's capital. But if you can't make it to D.C. this year, there are plenty of local marches happening, including this Sunday, where I'll be speaking to Miami County at the Miami County Right to Life March. I hope to see you there. Now, folks, it is time for our main event. I'm super excited to welcome my friend, longtime colleague, Dr. John Wood. He's an author, speaker, and evangelist on to talk about his new series, among other things. But we're going to be talking about the 7 Deadly Dragons. And Dr. Wood, can I say you look as handsome as ever? But again, welcome back to Say Yes to Life.
You can say that if you'd like. So thanks so much, Peter. It's great to be with you, and I'm so excited to talk to you again, and appreciate all the work that you do.
Absolutely. Well, ironically, Dr. Wood is actually in the studio as I'm at Steak and Shake, so I'll bring back some beef tallow fries for you
Nice.
when I make it back into Toledo there. But anyway, with all that being said, John, since it's been since 2021 since we had you on the show, so my apologies, we haven't had you back for about 5 years. But it might be nice to reacquaint our old and new listeners with your story. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could just share kind of where you grew up, tell us about your family and how the Lord got a hold of you in this journey, which has you producing now so much great material fruit for the kingdom of God.
Awesome. Yeah. So I grew up in Southwest Ohio in the Cincinnati Diocese. I was one of four boys, and a lot of sports in my growing up, and a lot of running, a lot of racing. And that's where I kind of developed this whole war within mentality. And my Catholicism was a big part of my life. I have a great Catholic family. I'm so grateful for my mom and my dad. But as I went through college and did those sports, my faith kind of grew stronger. I was challenged in my faith. That was actually a great blessing for me because I, was challenged to learn more about it. And went on to become an eye doctor. That's what I do for a living. I travel to nursing homes. I do eye exams in nursing homes. Met my beautiful wife while I was in college. And together we've had 5 kids. They range in ages from 21 down to 5. But in the midst of all that, I just got challenged to start speaking at my own local parish. I kind of said yes, and then God kind of took the reins from there. And I met Matthew Kelly, and he published my first book, Ordinary Lives, Extraordinary Mission, through the Dynamic Catholic Book Program, and that just gave me just hundreds of opportunities to travel the country, to share my faith, to share my passion for my faith. And in the midst of all that, something that really kind of pushed me along those lines was the death of my father back in 2008. When my dad, he died of cancer. And one thing about cancer is it gives you time to say what you need to say. And, I promised my dad before he died that I would spend the rest of my life trying to become the saint God created me to be and inspire as many other people as possible to do the same. And that's really where Extraordinary Mission was born. That's the name of our nonprofit organization, where we just kind of challenge people to become, those saints that we're called to be, the universal call to holiness. And that's kind of developed into my whole family being part of that ministry. And now we focus largely on doing sacramental retreats. A lot of families with kids that are preparing for First Holy Communion and for confirmation. And it's a great blessing to encounter those families where they're at, to challenge them, to uplift them, and give them the resources they need to hopefully grow and be holy families. And that's kind of our goal, is to build holy families and forge families of faith.
John, why sacramental retreats? Why did you key in at because the sacraments begin when you're very, very young, right? So why did you guys focus in on that in particular?
Well, again, for about 10 years, when I was traveling the country and doing missions and conferences, the audience was largely an older generation, and it was a bit of a frustration for me that wasn't really my target audience. I heard a lot of brokenhearted people saying, my kids, they went off and now they're not practicing their faith anymore. My grandkids aren't getting the faith. What do I do now? And I wanted to kind of reach the source there. And my wife teaches second grade sacramental prep. She's done that for a long time at our local parish. And I realized that even disengaged Catholics, they still want their kids to receive First Communion. And when kids are in second grade, they're still open to falling in love. They're still open to believing in the miraculous. They're very animated, and it's a great time to reach families. It's not too late, in other words. And I realize every parish in America pretty much does a second grade sacramental retreat, but they mostly just do it themselves. And I thought, we could create a world-class second grade retreat. We call it Dragon Slayers, to kind of represent dragons as sins, temptations, and obstacles to becoming saints. We can make it exciting, we can make it engaging, and then we can inspire them, and hopefully at that point when they come, and reach them where they're at. And that's why it's been a huge blessing for us to kind of refocus on those sacramental retreats to reach those families when their kids are still very young.
I love what you said, that the kids are still young enough to fall in love. And I think it was G.K. Chesterton said, let your religion be less of a theory and more of a love affair. And so it's a tremendous opportunity to hit kids at a young age to say, look, you can have a personal, deep relationship with a friend, your Savior, Jesus Christ. And I think if we focused more on catechizing our youth and poured ourselves out as parents into those relationships, we could remake the next generation, and doing that kind of change the world. So please continue your work there. But let's dive into what got me to have you on the show today, because I'm super excited. I'm reading to my own kids right now the Seven Deadly Dragon series. I find it personally funny myself, so I really enjoyed it. And I was just talking to a friend today at work, and I don't recommend things easily.
Okay.
I really want them to be something that I believe in, that I think is good, and I think this series is good. Why did you write this series of book, and tell our listeners just what they're all about? I'd be curious also to dive in with you a little bit. Why to present this particular series through fiction as well, because it's serious things, and sometimes I think we get lost in fiction. But I just want to get your thoughts on the fictional narrative behind it.
Yeah, so we were at that point where, that retreat has grown exponentially over the last 5 or 6 years, where we speak to, over 120 parishes, 3,000 families, and we don't want to just reach them for a day and inspire them. We want to equip them. We want to give them resources. We want to keep them going and keep the fire blazing. And so I started off to writing a book, and at first it was more of a catechetical book, and I always trial things on families, and I want their honest feedback. And a lot of the feedback we got was kids love stories. They like stories. They're engaged by stories. And that's so true. You mentioned G.K. Chesterton, and Chesterton said fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons are real, but because they tell us dragons can be defeated. And he points out that kids already know dragons are real, that sin, temptation, there's evil in the world. They know that intuitively. They can see it. They need someone to inspire them, the St. George, that the dragon can be slain. And stories, we remember stories. You want someone to know the truth, then tell them the truth. But if you want them to remember the truth and love the truth and live the truth, then tell them a great story. I think that's why Tolkien was a great evangelist of the last century. He told us amazing stories, and we learn virtue and truth inside those stories because they teach us a great truth. So that's why we kind of decided to write these into a story. And the second grade retreats are part of reconciliation, First Holy Communion, and we wanted a way to help kids examine their conscience. That's the genius of Catholicism. If you can name your dragon, you can slay your dragon. And so we focused on the 7 deadly sins, and we called them the 7 deadly dragons. They're very steeped in Catholic theology and Thomas Aquinas and those things where we want to examine our conscience, and that's a great way to do it. And so when you give the dragon a name and a visual and an image, and I'm an eye doctor, so I use the 7 colors of the visible light spectrum of Roy G. Biv. And my daughter drew the dragons. My other daughter helped write the stories, and it was a family project for families. And the feedback is exactly what we wanted, that the kids get enthralled in the stories. They're also for the parents. We want the parents reading the stories to the kids, because now the kids, they recognize the dragons. They're fictional stories, but they're partly true. I thought back to my own life, and it says at the beginning, this is a work of fiction, except the parts that are true. Because, I messed up a lot as a kid, as we all did. And what would it look like for a second or a third grader to struggle with pride? What would it look like for them to struggle with greed and wrath and gluttony? And so I had to think about, I want this to be real. I want this to be real life for kids and something they can relate to. And that's why I think the stories are powerful, because they can see themselves in the story. And they can learn how to deal with those temptations and those obstacles. And that's kind of exactly what we hoped. And now we have a language. So if the kids know the dragons and the parents know the dragons, then all the parents need to really do, in some senses, name the dragon. If the kid's whining for more toys, they can say, hey, that's the green dragon of greed. And the child knows the dragon because they read the stories. Or if they're throwing a temper tantrum, they can say, hey, blue dragon of wrath is getting you. And they know, that's the blue dragon. And they know the virtue that slays the dragon. And so it's a great language to catechize, and it's a fun adventure for the families to get engaged in that language of evangelization.
And I like how the main character, so, just to give it some context as well, the main character is kind of going through a Dragon Slayer Academy. So it's not like these dragons are just kind of in modern day whatever, but it's, there is a purpose or to each kind of chapter, each kind of dragon, and then the virtue that kind of goes along with it. Where did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, it was just the idea of the 7 deadly sins, I think, is where it all started. And I was trying to just kind of figure out, how can I explain this to kids in a way that's a language that they might understand. And again, being an eye doctor in the visible light spectrum, kids remember things with colors. I went through the Great Adventure Bible Study with Jeff Cavins, and you know how powerful it is to know the story, and he used colors, and I thought that's genius. I can just think about the different parts of the story, and I can think of the color. I gave the dragons all kind of cool names in Greek and all that stuff, and Kenodox and Nvidia that kind of portray the deadly sins, and the advanced kids might remember that, but most of them are just going to remember the color. And I just wanted them to have a simple way of remembering those 7 deadly sins in a way that they could examine their conscience daily. And there's dragons around the house all the time. We talk about that in our podcast of how they can recognize the dragon. And so again, I'm convinced if you can recognize the dragon, you can slay the dragon. And that's exactly what an examination of conscience helps us do. And that's why I wanted to create these stories.
Well, I want everybody who's listening right now, especially if you have little kids, to order these books. So where can people go right now to find out more information, read about it, and also order them?
Yeah, you can get everything on extraordinarymission.com is our website. That's where the books and everything are. We also do have a streaming platform. It's dragonslayers.tv. So you can listen to music. You can hear our podcast. You can during Lent, I'll actually be reading the stories out loud for everybody. You can actually read along with me and get a daily Lenten challenge. So those are the 2 basic places. Extraordinarymission.com is where you're going to get the books. They're also available in bookstores, Amazon, those places. But you can get the full series at the best price on our website. And dragonslayers.tv, where you can get more supplemental materials and resources.
Friends, we're talking with Dr. John Wood. He's the president of a nonprofit organization, Extraordinary Mission. He's also an eye doctor. He's a father. He's a husband. And he's someone that is sharing the gospel through stories. And we're talking about the 7 Deadly Dragons series today. I encourage you to go to extraordinarymission.com and order your copy today. All right, John, one of the things we're finding through our statistical analysis at the Center for Christian Virtue, where I work, and we've dived into this with our Hope in the Future report, so you can read more at ccv.org/hope, is just how important the family is to the well-being of society. It's something, of course, our church has been preaching for centuries. The future of humanity passes by the way of the family. It's what St. John Paul II said. But we look particularly at the state of Ohio, and the key not only to the family, but also the key to having a stable, faith-filled, and active father in their children's lives. And John, I've always admired you from afar with some of the things you do to lead your family, whether that's, Lenten penances, whatever it might be. Can you share your thoughts, especially for those fathers listening to this show, on what it looks like to be a good father, and what the men listening to this show can do to grow in becoming the man and the saint that God has called them to be?
Yeah, so one of the big reasons we decided on the Dragon Slayer theme is that dads are hard to reach, and even young boys sometimes, and we wanted a topic that would grab their attention and draw them in, and I think even every little boy growing up, something inside of us wants to slay a dragon, and so that language kind of draws them in, because one of my targets is the dads. And when I can get them to a 2nd grade sacramental retreat, and that's about 40% of the parents who come are dads. We invite both parents, but getting the dads there is just key, because I want the dads to realize their role is huge. We want our dad to be proud of us. We all do, I think. And the context of our faith is family. And we learn the faith not from a classroom, not from a textbook, but as you talked about, it's about love, it's about encounter, it's about a family, and we identify God as Father. And so it's so key that Father, and I look at my own dad, and I think we all do in some sense of how we were raised, and I just remember the good about my dad. Like, we all make mistakes, and sometimes we can beat ourselves up as dads, but it's just being that witness and being there. My dad was not a deeply religious guy. He converted to Catholicism after he married my mom. But what I remember about my dad, he introduced me to God the Father more than anybody I can remember, because he just loved to be with his sons. He was always there at my games. He was always at my track meets. He was always there to help me when I was down. And if I had questions, I would always go to my dad. And, when he would walk into a track meet, my heart would beat a little faster, because I was nervous, because my dad's watching. And I think it took losing my father on earth before I realized I had a father in heaven. And all I want is to cross the finish line of life with nothing left to give, knowing that I fought the good fight. And then I want to look up and I want to hear the words, "This is my beloved son, with whom I'm well pleased." And for dads to realize that every child wants their dad to be proud of them. And it's not about you being perfect. It's not about you knowing everything before you can teach them anything. It's just being that witness, loving them unconditionally, and loving God yourself. They love what you love. They follow you. If you'll just lead them, they will follow you. And I think I'm certainly not a perfect dad. And I spend, most of my time in the confessionals talked about my failures as a father and a husband, but I'm going to keep getting up. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying to be that witness. And Father John Ricardo challenged me many years back that you got to pray for your kids and pray out loud for your kids. And he challenged us to set aside a day of the week for each member of your family. And on that day, just pour out your heart and pray for that person. And it takes about 30 seconds a kid, but when they hear their daddy praying for them, saying, Lord, we bless Hannah. Thank you for the beautiful young lady she's growing into, and how she helps take care of her little sister, and how she helps at all those retreats and uses her gift for art to draw all of those dragons and saints. And Lord, just let her know how much you love her and how much we love her, and help her grow to be a great saint. And I got to believe that, after 5 or 10 years of my kids hearing me pray that prayer, at least once a week, I got to believe it makes a difference that, the kids know our dream for them is heaven. And that's the key. You thirst for heaven, they'll thirst for heaven. You strive for greatness, they'll strive for greatness, and they will follow you if you lead them. And I think that's what it looks like to be a good father, is just putting God first and loving Him with all your heart. And I think kids will follow you.
John, I love that. It's the power of the presence that the Father has, just in His presence can really shape and mold a family to engage and not be afraid. It's not easy always just to pray out loud, even in front of your own family, but to challenge yourself to do so. But one thing that's on my heart right now, too, I think for our men listening, and it's so important, and you can correct me on the color of the dragon, but I'm thinking about the dragon of lust, which is particularly prevalent in our culture and society today with pornographic addictions, how much the temptation to fight against chastity, it's all over our culture today. So I want to challenge men listening to the program to think about finding an accountability partner. You're not in this by yourself. To have a man that you check in on a daily basis or on a weekly basis in the different aspects of your life, but particularly that area of chastity, to help you be a man of integrity, someone who's not just living it publicly, but someone who's living it interiorly as well, I think can really help us as men be vulnerable, open up, and recognize we're not meant to do this alone. Iron sharpens iron. We kind of need each other in this battle to fight against each one of those dragons. But in particular, in this culture today, to have a heart that's pure and committed to chastity as well. But one of the things, because I've seen it in some of my ministry, is, our best efforts, they feel like sometimes they're not coming through to evangelize a culture that is seemingly kind of crumbling around us. We have this dystopian nightmare of transgender surgery for kids, to the fact that, as we talked about, we're continuing to kill 1 million children every single year in this country, John. How did we descend so quickly into our current cultural chaos? And what should the everyday Catholic's focus be in rebuilding that culture of love, of life, and of peace?
Yeah, and I think you tapped on it earlier, and one of the great heroes of mine is St. John Paul II, and that he said, as the family goes, so goes the culture, so goes the whole world, and that's there's not one solution to all these problems, but my focus is on that family and what's right in front of you. As Mother Teresa said, you want to change the world, go home and love your family, and that's why I think being that witness as a father or moms and dads both. Is just so huge in teaching that virtue of chastity. And one thing we do at all of the retreats, we hand out about 3,000 crucifixes, large crucifixes, because that crucifix is that image of what true love looks like, that self-sacrificial love. And when we get to Book 7, the Violet Dragon of Lust, it's a call to chivalry. It's a call to laying down your life for the other, protecting the other, seeing every single person and every single human being as a son or a daughter of the Father that's worth dying for, that every person has that inherent dignity, not because of what they can do, not because of what they look like, because of who we are as human beings, as baptized Christians, sons and daughters of a great Father, that every single one of us has that value worth dying for. And that starts in the family, and showing our kids that unconditional love and what that looks like, and hanging that crucifix up and going to Mass every single weekend, and kneeling before the King of the universe in that humility and looking up at that crucifix and saying, send me, Lord, teach me, show me, help me to carry my crosses. And I can't look at a crucifix as a dad or a father without, Jesus convicting me. This is how I got my bride to heaven. How are you going to get yours there? And that's, I think, a powerful image for men especially, is that crucifix that we need to hang in our home, remind us what it means, to lay down our life for others.
John, I love that. We've got about 3 minutes left in the show here. I want to get your thoughts on, and I appreciate first the point, we're called to love first and foremost our family. And if love doesn't start in the home, we have no chance to carry it out into our neighborhood. We have no chance to carry it out into the community, nor into the political sphere, wherever it might be. What do you think we need from the church today? I mean, this is just one of my frustrations, that, sometimes, going to Mass, obviously I'm going to stay Catholic for the rest of my life because the Eucharist is present there. The truth is present there. So whether the music bad or the homily's not great, whatever it might be, the truth is still in the Catholic Church. But I want you to just pretend for a moment, if you can, that you're a bishop. You got your mitre hat on, and you have the opportunity to kind of direct your priests and your deacons over a diocese. What would be the direction? What do you think we need from the church now more than ever?
Well, I always say make those parents VIP. Sometimes they're not in the pew, and we can complain about that. But when I want to encounter them and I want to inspire them, but I'd say I want to invest in those resources. Those second graders cannot drive themselves to Mass. Those kids, if you want your parish to be vibrant and thriving, and you want people to grow in the faith, then give them the challenge. Don't water it down. John Paul II was about truth and love, but give them a challenge. Remind them who they are. Remind them they're made for mission. Remind them they're made for heaven, and nothing else matters. And that everything we do in life, whether it's our job, our business, our families, it's all there for one purpose: to help us become the saints we were created to be. If I can put that dream in my kids and inspire them and help them thirst for heaven, we'll live in a different world. But the mission comes first, and that's why we call it the extraordinary mission. And I think that's a powerful way to rebuild our church, is to lift up that family and challenge them to the extraordinary mission.
I love that. 2026, we need to be challenged, especially as men. So everyone who has a pulpit in any way, shape, or form, challenge your children. So we as fathers, we have a pulpit at home. And so to challenge not only your kids, but challenge yourself to be the saint that you've ultimately been called to be. John, thank you so much for challenging me, whether you realize it or not, by your witness and by the great and tremendous work that you're doing. Let's get that website out there one last time so people know where to get the books, where they can challenge their kids with your new fiction series.
Yep, extraordinarymission.com. That's where you can find everything. Thanks so much, Peter. It's always great seeing you and talking to you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go get some beef tallow fries and enjoy my ride home. You guys have a blessed one. Thanks so much, John Wood, and can't wait to talk to you next week on Say Yes to Life.